morning, everyone. I always say morning, and then once I say it, I realize it's not morning for anyone but me. We appreciate everybody watching. I want to do a quick introduction. I'm Billy Bob. I am here on the left coast, and we do this bi-weekly podcast, if possible, exposing Imperial Decline. And my co-host is Ben Toth, and he's in Hungary. Ben, you want to say hello a little bit?
Hello, everybody from snowy, slushy Hungary.
And we are very honored to have Professor Vladimir Golstein from Brown University, Professor of Slavic Studies. He's a return guest, friend of the show. Thank you so much, Vladimir, for coming back.
Hello, pretty snowy and cold here in Providence, Rhode Island.
Providence, Rhode Island. Awesome. And Ian Kummer, suburbs of Moscow. How's it going over there, Ian?
It's going good, pretty good. Last week was very cold. It's warmed up a little bit this week, fortunately. So it's a typical Russian winter so far.
Did you take an ice swimming dip? We just saw a video of Vladimir Putin doing it today.
Yes, I'm not Russian enough to do that one quite yet. That's very popular, though.
As a follower of Vladimir's Facebook, I know that's one of Vladimir's favorite pastimes is the ice dips.
I am actually planning to do it right after this show.
Okay, a true Russian. Let's get into our discussion. I was a little bit appalled watching this Thomas Friedman interview of Anthony Blinken. So what I was thinking when I was watching this was about Madeleine Albright. So Madeleine Albright was on 60 Minutes. She was confronted by Leslie Stahl regarding the 50,000 children that would die due to U.S. sanctions against Iraq. And Madeleine Albright said straight up, hey, we feel bad about the 50,000 children, but it's worth it. It's worth it to kill these 50,000 children to further our geopolitical ends. So when I was watching this clip, it was very reminiscent of that. And I thought to myself that Blinken definitely is trying everything he can to avoid to say the words that got Madeleine Albright in trouble. Meanwhile, he's doing the exact opposite in deeds. And so just the hypocrisy is astonishing. So with that, if we can hit play. Are you able to hit play, Ben?
Let's go.
Do Jewish lives matter more than Palestinian and Muslim lives, Palestinian Christian lives, given the incredible asymmetry in casualties?
No, period. For me, I think for so many of us, what we're seeing every single day in Gaza is gut-wrenching. And the suffering we're seeing among innocent men, women, and children breaks my heart. The question is, what is to be done? We've made judgments about how we thought we could be most effective in trying to shape this in ways to get more humanitarian assistance to people, to get better protections and minimize civilian casualties. And at every step along the way, not only have we impressed upon Israel its responsibilities to do that, we've seen some progress in areas where, absent our engagement, I don't believe it would have happened.
That was his long answer.
So what do you guys think about that? Like, to me, he wants to absolve himself of responsibility for enabling what's going on in Gaza. I mean, Israel, I'm not sure if they manufacture any 2,000-pound bombs. I think they get them all from us. I'm not certain, but I know that what they're doing right now would not be possible if it weren't for Anthony Blinken giving them the weapons and the PR cover to do what they're doing. So it's just so angering that he's going to sit there and say, I am so against what is happening right now. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, what I think he's trying to make kind of the virtue out of necessity. I think United States is a big participant of the whole kind of Middle East fiasco. They themselves don't quite know how to resolve it. but they also know that Israel at that moment decided to act like that, and they are not ready, United States, to challenge it. So they basically say we admonish them, we say that, but Israelis have this kind of made, and I would say from what I hear is a collective decision. There are very, very few people who are kind of within in Israel who are against that. Most of the people are so angry with Hamas, they decided in the country, no matter what it takes. And the United States sort of, more or less washes their hands on that. They should have been acted before. I hope they will act soon. It should be settled somehow, two-state solution, whatever it is, it cannot go on. But at that moment, he just shrugs it off because that's what Israel is going to do in any case. In terms of what you, Billy Bob, said of arms, I think Israel is actually have fair amount of their own weapons, especially to fight against not particularly sophisticated, opponent. Of course, they have their tunnels there, but basically, I think Israel, with their tanks, with unbelievably strong aviation, planes, they can level Gaza, and the United States is probably at that moment just backs off.
Well, I mean, I disagree that the warehouses are still chock full of weapons, because they dropped something like 2 Hiroshima's worth of TNT, of dumb bombs, of explosives, and Germany apparently is trying to send 10,000 or 100,000 rounds of tank ammunition over there. So but going back to Blinken, it definitely is I agree with Vladimir, like a wash our hands. We tried to nudge them in the right direction. They didn't listen. This isn't the US. We're not culpable. We tried. I think that's what it equates to.
It's literally a Pontius Pilate moment. They're literally, I wash my hands of it, and it's the mob's fault if they do this.
Look what they made me do.
Yes, I think we're going to see a Blinken presidential ticket, and these are moments for him to look like a statesman. I mean, I'm dead serious. I think in 4 years we're going to see a Blinken campaign. That's why he gets so much airtime.
No, that's an interesting conjecture. That's very possible. I mean, he's definitely not too old for it, and he's got this experience. So for sure, I mean, Clinton was Secretary of State, and then she so it's definitely a stepping stone in that direction. But it does bring up the question. I mean, well, first of all, I was corrected by Gregor. I misspoke. I said 50,000, and it was 500,000, which 10 times worse. 10 times worse.
Hi, Gregor. I know him on Facebook.
Okay. But it matters. It matters. So what is the truth? I mean, can we come to some agreement about how much U.S. military assistance is enabling this? Like, if the U.S. did not give any military assistance or threatened to cut off military assistance or financial aid to the state of Israel, like they have leverage. They can stop this, right? So Vladimir was suggesting that, they would do this whether or not we, because we don't have the leverage, but I don't think that's true, right? Like, we have the leverage to compel them. I mean, we give them so much aid every year. Now they might be able to continue the bombing for another week or two without us. But if we threaten them with the colossal billions of aid that we give them every year, you'd think that, we could actually, put our money where our mouth is. If we say we don't like what's going on, they would have to listen, but we don't want them to. And so if we don't want them to, we shouldn't pretend we don't want them to do what they're doing, because we want them to do what they're doing, or we would stop it. I don't know.
I would say the situation is a little more complex. That is, like what you're saying is like, say, I know what is right for you, and I know that I pay you money if, like, say you are drinking a lot of vodka, and I say don't drink vodka or you won't get money. Okay, you agreed. I don't think United States knows how to solve the problem. I don't think they know what's going on in the Middle East. You mentioned Blinken. They are totally incompetent State Department. They're like, as recently as 3 months ago, they were saying the situation in Gaza is under control. We have Saudis by something. We control that. We do this. They don't control anyone. We see.
They said it's the most peaceful Middle East
Yeah, no peaceful meeting. So basically, they yes, I agree with you. They have money, but they don't know what to do with them. They don't. They what? Okay, just imagine. Stop bombing, and then what? What will happen? you know, Do we know how to solve the situation with Gaza? How do we solve? There is like besides Gaza, there is like another big Palestinian pocket on Western Bank. So since there is no comprehensive solution, the United States keeps on working like say these are our SOBs and this is not our SOBs. Here we're trying to work with Saudis versus Iran, but instead it has to be probably some kind of comprehensive solution which will recognize the interest of every country, because rather than demonizing Iran all the time, the more United States demonize Iran, the more Iran will try to stick it back. And so on. We also with one hand we're trying to introduce some peace. With the other hand, we support Qatar. We support this. So I don't think United States actually know. So they have leverage, but they don't know what to do with it. But if they start insisting on something, they will stand a lot to lose. So if they start bullying Israel too much, it might work very badly domestically. We all know that.
Yeah.
I can imagine politicians who say, I'm gambling, I'm risking my career, provided I know a solution. But if you don't have a solution, why do you want to gamble with your career?
But what about the UN solution for the peaceful settlement of the Palestine issue? Like every year, it's the entire world against the U.S. and Israel at the UN General Assembly. So there's a framework in place. I don't see Blinken saying that's what we need to do, and we need to, have a ceasefire immediately, end the slaughter of innocent civilians, and let's work on what the UN has. Everybody in the world agrees is the process and the route to take for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. I mean, that's what they ought to do.
I think you're both right.
There's no framework. There's no solution. Like everybody knows what the solution is. Every fucking year we talk about what the solution is. It's the entire world against the U.S. and Israel. Like there's an obvious solution. It's justice.
Just a quick side point, and then on to Ian. Sergei Lavrov made the point in one of his monster thing. What do you call them? PR. Q&A sessions, that he agrees 100% with Billy Bob that all the region's players have to be part of that peace process, which they're currently not, because the US, and we'll get back to this point, doesn't know diplomacy. This State Department does not know diplomacy. Ian?
I was going to say, I think you're both right. I think that leverage does exist, but I think Professor Goldstein's also right that the Biden administration, the State Department, it's probably one of the most inept State Departments we've had in a long time, and they just don't know how to do it because they have the leverage, but if you're going to leverage someone, you need to provide an alternate solution to both sides, and they don't have one. I mean, maybe a President Nixon, maybe a President Kennedy, a President Reagan, a President Clinton, someone more competent, regardless of what you think of it morally, someone more competent could use that leverage. Yes.
I hate to bring up Trump as someone more competent because he isn't, but he killed Soleimani, right? And Iran then struck with a big missile strike a US base. So he immediately sat down to calm the situation, got into negotiations. This White House will never do that.
He sat down with the Taliban too. We need to give Trump credit where due. He did sit down with the Taliban.
Absolutely. And this one is incapable of doing something like that. It's just press on ahead. But on the point of they don't know diplomacy, just inside a bubble, Billy Bob, if you want to share my screen, this is another clip from Davos, from the same duo. So this is Blinken with Friedman.
The first thing I was told to do by the president was roll up our sleeves,
less than a minute,
re-engage with our allies, re-engage with our partners, build new collections of countries that were and organizations that were fit for purpose to deal with specific problems. And I think we've done that in such a way that on some of the really big issues of the day, whether it's how to deal with China, how to deal with Russia, we have more convergence than we've had at any time in recent memory between us, key partners throughout Europe, throughout Asia, and even in other parts of the world about how to manage this problem. So that's a position of strength. Second,
check this out.
In areas like the Middle East, where we have this profound and in many ways gut-wrenching challenge right now, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from virtually every country, they want the United States. They want us present. They want us at the table. They want us leading. The first thing I was told to do by the president was roll up our sleeves, re-engage.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's a loop. Come
So-
on. He believes every country in the Middle East wants more of American intervention. That's what.
I want to agree with Vladimir because he hit the nail on the head exactly why Blinken isn't, pursuing the UN policy of peaceful settlement on the question of Palestine. So it's because domestic considerations. So like he said, if they bully, if they force Israel to engage rationally, it's going to be domestically very damaging. And we have an election year, So I think that's a big reason why you're seeing the hypocrisy, why you're seeing the, we want peace, we just can't do anything. And they're not using their leverage because it would be domestically really bad for the Democrats' political aspirations in the next election.
I also think that the situation is, what Blinken is saying, he's definitely lies and believes his own lies. That is the idea that every player there wants United States is absolutely not correct, including even Israel, because there is tremendous, Israelis, we know they like Trump because they probably want to know how to deal with them. But they don't know how to deal with Democrats because Democrats are very confused. They say one thing, they do another thing, they aspire to something else. So when I've been in Israel, that's one thing I keep on hearing, that Democrats are not to be trusted. And indeed, Democrats, are pushing for some kind of, liberal Tel Aviv kind of driven, leaders like this. Lapid used to be there, who is not particularly popular, who also doesn't know what to do. So within Israel, there is this kind of complexity. United States doesn't know how to deal with this kind of rather loose cannon, and also kind of incompetent cannon, Netanyahu. But he's just, he's not. He should have been resigned the first day after this attack because it's happened on his watch. He did. So, they push for some kind of Tel Aviv liberals who cannot introduce anything there. Netanyahu probably has enough strength, but he's not interested. So U.S. is they can brag that they, control, and they probably control with their money certain European countries like Poland and Baltic states, but that's about it. And Saudis probably because of the oil, and Qatar because of money, whatever it is. But I don't think they have such a big presence and trust and goodwill, because look, they totally again and again they ostracize, push away. Now they push away Iran. They don't know how to integrate Turkey. They don't know what to do with. So they create, like many people say, U.S. creates chaos. That's what they're good at.
Professor Golstein,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, what do you think of Professor Golstein? What do you think of the assertion that I just thought of in my head that maybe at least some of these Arab states, like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Jordan, would like more American intervention, but they would like more competent American intervention? You think that might be a true statement?
Both competent and look, they know, that's a kind of relatively traditional societies. They know their history. They remember history. United States were very active in Afghanistan, and then what they did, they just turn over and leave and left everyone they're hanging, their supporters. So everybody is very careful around the United States. This phrase of Kissinger that it's sort of bad to be American enemy, but it is deadly to be American friend, and they're kind of very well aware of that. So they, but also trying to edge such a serious player, historical player as Iran, to edge them out, I don't think it's reasonable.
Yeah,
I think when Blinken talks about everybody he talks to wants American leadership around the world, but he's talking to the Western puppets like
Al-Sisi,
Abdullah. I mean, these are proxies, Western proxies. The people in those countries absolutely do not want the U.S. involved. So he's just talking about a very small class of, proxies and puppets that probably do because they benefit from, U.S. largesse. What else can we say about Israel Palestine? I mean, we could go ahead.
I want to get a bit of a riff on the economic side of things, because we all know what's been going on with the Red Sea with the Houthis, Ansar Allah of Yemen, and the US basically doing the third day of strikes in a row, and they're still attacking ships in a row. And it really is hurting. I mean, Netanyahu, by the way, Vladimir, you were right. There were a lot of European and American headlines saying, you're done, you've lost the war. There's a lot of support lost for this guy, but he's hunkering down, saying there will be no Palestinian leadership post-war. We have to rule from the river to the sea, which is apparently banned, but we have to rule the whole area. Anyway, he had a budget meeting, which apparently many ministers just walked out of, and he's cannibalizing some ministries to keep the war budget floating. So economically, Israel is not doing well. And the embargo that the guys in sandals with the makeshift rockets have done to Israel is just amazing. I mean, I remember because just last year, you know, the price cap is going to isolate Russia, right? The Russian tankers and the ships will not go anywhere. Right now, this little country, 30 million Houthis, have isolated Israel. If you look at some of these maritime, you know, they send little messages, and everybody aboard is Chinese. Russian ship transiting, no contact to Israel. These are the guys who are floating through, no worries. But if you actually go to the port of Haifa, you get shot at, and they're doing it effectively. And the US is incompetent to deal with it. And I just want to share this. It's very short, 10 seconds of a Biden interview. Okay. Maritime One, or whatever, the helicopters in the background, hopefully you can understand.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
That's him. That's the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world. Absolutely unequipped to deal with the challenges of today.
What's your analysis on the whole Houthi issue, the Red Sea, the economic embargo? Do you think it's being it's hurting Israel, or do you think it's blown out of proportion a little bit, Vladimir?
I think it's blown out of proportion a little bit, but it hurts your Western countries. It hurts
Europe,
Israel. Yeah. But I think what is important to know, I mean, again, look at these Houthis. You know, on the one hand, they are kind of tribal leaders. On the other hand, they have very sophisticated weapon, which can take, all this boat. Where do they get money from? Where do they get this equipment? It's sort of, it's not, you have to have, it's not like, AK-47 shooting through the sand. It's something kind of serious. I don't have any doubt about that the main source of money is probably from Iran. So again, you need to talk to Iran. You need to talk to these people, and you have to trust them. But if you start by bombing Soleimani, then setting up, when they were celebrating 2 years of Soleimani, there is some ISIS, terrorist activity. Now it's another thing. This is still minor kind of mentality of bullying this side or this side. It doesn't work in these big situations. It should be. I agree with Lavrov. He understands this. It should be comprehensive solution where people have to everybody should recognize. I'm not saying that we need to listen only to Iran. We need to listen to every participant, because they are there, they live there, and they want to, I'm sure, common people, including Gazans, they want to live in peace, work, trade, do things like that, rather than just ostracizing each other and demonizing each other and doing this. But I guess if we demonize Iran will demonize somebody, then somebody else. So it will go on.
But it's the U.S., right? It's the U.S. needs to change its approach to Iran. Yes. Iran would be happy to have the sanctions ended, to be treated like a normal, respected country that has sovereignty. But we've had 75 years of the U.S. not respecting the sovereignty of other countries and just acting like the geopolitical bully and hegemon. And it's difficult for them to change their stripes. And so that's this whole process of the U.S. realizing that they can no longer bully the entire world. People are standing up, people are resisting, and their unipolar hegemony is changing to multipolarity. And which is good, but it's an adjustment process, and we're like at the beginning of that process. But exactly, that's what needs to happen. The U.S. needs to respect Iran's sovereignty, stop declaring them an enemy, stop trying to embargo them and destroy them and subvert them and overthrow their government, et cetera, et cetera. That would be great. How do we get that to happen, Vladimir?
Because it's worth remembering these events. Was it like October 7 when there was a Hamas attack and then the whole hell broke loose? It was like literally a week before, United States organizes some kind of a peace deal, agreement, diplomatic
Saudi
between Saudis and Israel, edging Iran out. Nobody wants to, like say, if we are three talking and trying to shut you up, you sooner or later say, hey, I'm here. Listen to me. And that's what kind of Iran is one way or another. The same thing applies to Russia. The same thing applies. Syria has to be taken seriously rather than just creating havoc there. Yeah, United States have to, who are our diplomats? If you look at it, it's always political appointees, people without much of education, who have the only thing they have is an agenda or obedience to their agenda-driven leaders. I mean, I'm sure that there are some good people, smart people in State Department, but I don't think they are let in. I actually had a friend who used to work there, and one of his colleagues said he had some ideas about how to treat Russia, and he is reporting to Newland, Victoria
Oh, she's
Newland,
still there. Yeah.
who is a big shot. And he said, I'm sitting there and in front of her, telling her what's going on. For 30 minutes, she's playing with her phone, sending messages, and say, okay, thanks, goodbye. So they're not interested. They already know what they're doing. They're not interested. So I can, I imagine somebody. The same thing actually applies to Israel. Apparently, there were reports to them. There is preparation. There is something going on. No, we know. we in Blinken decided there is nothing happening and everything's cool. That's this is not a normal, healthy approach to situations.
Yeah, I agree, especially on the Israeli front, because as master does the puppet, and Netanyahu didn't just say that we are going to be in charge of everything between the river and the sea, all of Palestine post-war, but he's talking about open attacks on Lebanon. There are apparently border clashes with Egypt. I mean, he's talking about going to war on all fronts, not listening to anyone, including the Americans. There's a lot of this senseless stupidity going everywhere. But just a small point on the West likes to characterize the Houthis as Iran proxies, and I think that is patently false. They've been in a freedom fight for 10 years. Maybe, of course, they get some funding, some aid from here and there, but Iran can't just say, hey, guys, chill, because they have their own interests. They're following their own, basically, laws.
Well, I would say, one, the biggest, I would say the most, maybe not the biggest, but the most frequently repeated justification for why the USA needs the most expensive blue water navy in the world is to combat piracy. It's like, why do we have, who's this navy for? Who are we fighting? Well, it's piracy. It's, it's the security
Somalis.
of sea lanes. Right. But now this is a very clear piracy situation, but there's this very, very weak response to it. Now, what do you think that's for? Is it because there's some fear? Because is there some fear of the Houthis themselves launching an effective attack against American ships intervening against the piracy, or is it possibly the fear of Iran seeing that as an encouragement? I mean, it's just because I assume it's not. I mean, I would assume it's not a physical incapability of it. I mean, the Red Sea is not a big place.
I think it is, but Vladimir?
Yeah, I think they probably don't really want to escalate. Don't forget that there is certain division between, say, United States and a lot of European countries over Israel, over support, for unilateral support. If United States start bombing, the Yemen into the Stone Age, it's not going to play well. It will be one more thing. So they are probably, and they are desperately trying to keep this coalition together. It wouldn't play well with Turkey. It wouldn't play well with many other. So they're trying to keep this. So they don't want. I don't think they want to escalate. They want to do this narrow strikes. But consequently, this thing it's like put it on low burner.
How do you?
Can
How
I?
do you think? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Slightly disagree there, because maybe the first salvo, I think it was 100 rockets, was maybe, okay, here's your warning, don't do anything else. Maybe that was that, but we're on the third or fourth volley now. And I think there's a degree of physical incapability, because for 8 out of 10 years, the Yemenis were at war with Saudi Arabia, sponsored by the US, as in armed by the US. Same bombs, smart. We can bomb anything, bunker busters and all that. But most of their production, most of the stuff that they need, I think it's under mountainous territory. It's as mountainous, if not more, than Iran. It's not readily available to Western ISR. The stuff they want to hit. I mean, there was an article after the first strike saying, well, basically they hit every target that they hit in 2007. Which were basically empty. So they didn't. I think we damaged maybe 20% of what we wanted to, of the targets we wanted to hit. So I think there's a degree of, this isn't a problem that our solutions are meant for. This isn't a problem we can solve with our smart bombs and our Navy carrier and our bombers. I think there's a degree of that.
The only way to deal with Yemen militarily would be to occupy the country with maybe 500,000 boots on the ground.
Much more.
How is it going to play out? Will cooler heads prevail, Vladimir?
No, I think the United States, this is their absolutely important dogma. They're not going to put boots on the ground. Yeah. So they will probably try to either bomb or bribe Qatar, which they hope will do something. But for the time being, the routes are disrupted, something is happening. It means the price of oil might go up a little bit, but the United States frequently benefits from high expensive oil, because then they can sell more of their oil, which is when it goes to low, they cannot produce. So it's the whole idea with this is just very interesting. So they try to edge Russia from the energy markets, but Norway benefits like crazy from Russia's absence. US benefits like crazy. So
and India. Mm-hmm. Because it's reselling Russian oil to Europe,
India, So unfortunately, if you start you're healthy, fine. You have some kind of disease. How many companies benefit? So they want you to be sick.
Yeah. Gregor makes an interesting point here, which we didn't really, articulate fully, but essentially, Yemen is initiating a economic embargo of Israel, through their coastline, and saying that we will stop doing this. We will stop embargoing Israel if there's a ceasefire. And so they feel that, in accordance with the Convention on Genocide, that it's a totally lawful thing to do. And so the U.S. response to that isn't to, I agree, we need to stop a genocide. Let's get Israel to, to agree to a ceasefire. Instead of doing that, the U.S. chooses to bomb Yemen. So to attack Yemen for, trying to stop a genocide. What about the genocide question, Vladimir? And then what about the ICJ, South Africa going to the criminal court and saying, this is illegal. This is, or at least we need a ceasefire to determine or to make sure that a genocide doesn't take place. Do you think the G word is being misused? I would say that the G word prior to this event has been misused. It's been misused against China. It's been misused against Russia. But here, I'm not sure it's being misused. What do you think?
I do think it's being misused. I'm not saying that people are not killed, that they are. But I think it works as a red kind of flag for Israelis. They get they get the opposite result from that. Rather than saying, let's sit at the table, we have to think about how each culture thinks and perceives itself. And Israelis, when they hear things like that, the rest of the world is against us. We have to fight like crazy. They call, how dare they call us genociders? We are the perennial victims of genocide. The whole world is filled of anti-Semites. We have to fight till the bitter end. So it's just simply, I don't think it's educational. I don't think it's constructive. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be finds the way to put in pressure on everyone there to negotiate, and somehow it should be, this is a festering wound. Everybody knows that. It's people are suffering, people are unhappy, people have like very sick kind of systems. A lot of people in Gaza are not happy with Hamas. They're not. But can they into this unhealthy situation bring some rather rulers? I'm not sure. Israel is the same thing. They have to have some kind of productive society. But when they are under siege by the rest of the world, then some radical Netanyahu all of a sudden gets credibility. You see, I told you so. They're against us. I'm going to bomb the hell out of them. So
it confirms their worst fears about humanity being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, and anti-Israel. Because they think it's so totally such an unfair assertion that their self-defense and protecting themselves is seen as a genocide to a lot of the world, and that's definitely a problem. That's a problem with their perception and the identity. The identity that gets inculcated through Zionist education and being brought up Zionist. That's what they're kind of many people are told to led to believe, instructed to believe, and then when things like this happen, like it confirms that. It can be confirming of their worst suspicions about the rest of humanity, and then you get into these intractable problems, and it's a huge problem.
I would also add, if you allow me, is the whole issue of like propaganda. We're all kind of victims of it, and I've heard on the news actually here, they were reporting what Israelis see on their TV. They usually, when they see bombs flying on Gaza, they don't see people. They say, "Oh, look, we destroyed another building, which used to be whatever." While people like those who watch Al Jazeera watch the very opposite. They watch like only people crying, children, blah blah. And We've seen it before. The same thing with Ukraine and Russia. Russians see how Ukrainians bomb a Donbass region. Ukrainians see some bombing and say, "Oh, so how do we get into people's heads that bombs kill people and they shouldn't be falling?"
Can I don't know, Vladimir, if you've either watched the first day of the ICJ proceedings where South Africa listed basically all the charges. It used all the pronunciations of the Israeli leaders, all the way from Netanyahu, Ben Gvir, the IDF guy, Hamas, all of them. And what they said, we're fighting Amalek, we're fighting the human animals, to the people, the soldiers in Gaza, saying there's no such thing as innocent survivors, and all it needed to do, and it was an open and closed case of the intent of genocide. And I think that's objectively true, whether there's propaganda on both sides. I mean, all they listed was pronunciations of Israelis, and then of course the death and all that. And the second day, let me paraphrase, because the second day was the Israeli defense. It was, we were victims of the Holocaust. It was all emotional, nothing factual. I can see that, the psychological makeup of Israeli society. And I agree that they would see things that way. But to paraphrase Lavrov at the same press conference, he said, you weren't the only victims of it. Romani, as well as 27 million Russians were the victims of it. And that cannot give you carte blanche in international relations. It just basically, you can't just do whatever you think you want to do in the world because of the Holocaust. This 80 years or so, this has to end. And I think, despite propaganda on both sides, there's an objective reality, as there is one in the conflict in Ukraine. And that can't be erased.
The only thing I would say is that, I don't know, maybe we live in the cynical age, but I don't trust any word which any politician say, because, what it reminds me of, this case against Israel is the case what liberal New York Times say bills against Trump. I mean, I'm not saying that Trump is an angel, but he says so many stupid things. If we start nailing him for every idiotic thing which he said, he'll be worse than Hitler. He'll be worse than this. He'll be worse. Some people have loose mouth, others don't. Israelis, they like to talk. They probably, get emotional. Of course, they shouldn't be talking like that. It's not right to anyone to demonize the other group of people. This is like idiotic. That you can say that we are fighting Hamas or whatever you want, but don't, this was absolutely. But I would say there is a big distance between the words and actions. Doesn't mean that people do not cross it. Very frequently they do, but there is a lot of statements, including, like some, if you read what Ukrainians say about the Russians, it's 10 times worse than anything. And yet, say Putin is smart enough, he has the war, but he does bomb Lviv out of existence, even though every second person in Lviv is probably saying that Russians are not humans. That's their conviction. That's their kind of part of their religion. So, I mean, words shouldn't be kind of taken at that's kind of my take. But even though, again, as a country with the power, with the bombs, with the rockets, they shouldn't use this language.
So you mentioned Lvov. I mean, I just don't want to derail the conversation before we go into, Lvov, because that's actually an interesting point. I don't want to switch the topic from Israel unless there's.
Go right ahead with your thought, Ian. And if we need to go back, we can go back. But let's just, what was your thought about Lvov?
Well, I was going to say, I'm curious what you think is going to happen, at the ends of this conflict in Ukraine, this war. Ukraine and Russia, Ukrainians and Russians, and as you said, I think that's a true statement just from what I see from Ukrainian nationals on social media. 1 out of 2 at least say these things. How are these people going to get along after the war, after it's resolved?
I think Russia knows enough not to push there. That was actually a big mistake of Stalin. Not mistake, but during the after the war, he wanted to create this buffer. He pushed into the territory which has never been part of Russia, not interested in Russia, was raised within this kind of Polish side and within Austro-Hungarian side, and they grabbed it. And this guy said, "Wait a minute, we're not part of you." But so this whatever they would decide, maybe it would be like smaller Ukraine, maybe parts of eastern Ukraine who want to join Russia will join Russia, but it would be an unbelievably big mistake. And I don't think Putin he didn't show that type of mistake before. In fact, he errs on the other side. He's very reluctant to grab these parts of the Ukraine which actually want to join in. The Russians get burned. They try to grab Hungary and Czech Republic and Poland, it never worked. So you don't want to go where you're not welcome. So I think they have to find it, but they have to make sure that these lunatics whose main religion is Russophobia and hatred of Russia do not have power, do not have a NATO basis on their territory from which they can shoot. So that's what they want to make sure. But I don't think there is any desire to incorporate that part of the world back into Russia.
So what do you think is a solution? I mean, I know we're going deep into speculation territory here, but it seems like the original plan was for a holistic Ukraine, no land grab at all. Yeah. But that went out the window. So now you have Ukraine minus 6 or 7 million pro-Russian voters. So whatever is left is going to be even more anti-Russia, just by fact that those pro-Russian voters are now actually in Russia and not voting in Ukrainian elections. What do you think is a possible solution to that?
That's a tricky thing. So I think they will. That's why maybe they have to rechange their thinking. They know that this whatever would be left of Ukraine are not going to like Russia, so they want to make it as weak as possible. So I envision that they will try to prove and get Kharkiv territory and try to push and get some Black Sea territories to make sure that this what's left of Ukraine doesn't have like tremendous tremendous threat. But also they would push to the territories which are heavily Russian, pro-Russian, Russian speakers, and so on. So that's the idea. Will they succeed? We don't know. For the time being, they succeeded very well on kind of stopping Ukrainian offensive. But every observer, militant observer on kind of there says that Russians actually are ready to go on the offensive. They sooner or later they will show their dominance and they will start pushing.
Yeah, I love that Sergei Shoigu says we are on active defense, which is more of an aggressive defense. And a lot of the Western headlines, who are deluded and scared, by the way, most European and American headlines are, well, Ukraine can survive this year if it does active defense. They do this mirroring all the bloody time. When it comes to the West, I know that, Medvedev is a very colorful character. He's allowed to say things that Putin can't say, but he says if you continue this, that will bring the statehood of Ukraine into question. And that brings to my mind something, like Chechnya, because in the 90s, everybody said there's going to be resentment forever. They're going to hate Russia forever. And look at Ramzan Kadyrov and look at his Chechens now, the bravest soldiers of Russia. And I think there's a real chance to actually say, no, you're not just not going to be a NATO protectorate on our border, on our doorstep, but you're actually going to be, back into the fold of, I think, Putin's been talking for a couple of months about three branches of the great Slavic tree of the three peoples, the Belarusians, the Ukrainians, and the Russians. Do you think there's anything behind these words, or is it just words? Because we also know it's election season in Russia.
I think he now tries to present himself as some kind of a statement which likes this this idea that Ukrainians are not our enemies. I don't want to bomb them too much. We are part of the whole thing. But I think there are enough realists in his cabinet, including himself, to know that I don't think he'll ever incorporate Western Ukraine. So and this is a little bit more difficult than Chechnya. We can try to compare, but the situation in Ukraine is way too much diverse. So I can easily imagine him having a person in Eastern Ukraine who is loyal to Russia. And even though there are some people, I know that Kharkov is heavily pro-Russian city. However, bombs are flying there. So some people who live there,
killing French,
they say, "Oh, Russians, they're bombing us." Well, they will forget, no doubt about that. These guys will forget once it's sort of settled, once they start getting Russian pensions, as opposed to Ukrainian pensions, which are not coming. So they will forget. But if Russians, hope to put some like Kadyrov over the whole Ukraine and hope that he will have the control of Western Ukraine, I wouldn't bet on that. It'll be a mistake.
Speaking of Kadyrov, I just wanted to promote Scott Ritter. He is on a great tour of Russia as we speak, and it's just like a peace tour, trying to promote understanding between American citizens and Russian citizens, and it's really great. But he was honored to have this great speech in front of all of the Chechen military, and Kadyrov was there. It was really impressive. I mean, Scott Ritter is such a hero for all that he's doing, and he's being recognized by these governments. So check that video out of Scott giving a great speech.
Talk about stage fright. That's 50,000 Kadyrov men, and he's just been to the Donbass, to Donetsk Oblast of Russia, and met Denis Pushilin, the local governor. So
what about the idea that Ukraine is going to start doing defensive, a defensive strategy, and they're going to just, attrit Russia, keep them from being able to take more territory, and in the meantime, they're just going to be using long-range missiles to make life difficult for people in Crimea or in the Donbass. Can that strategy be successful? Can it go on for years? Because that's the what we're hearing from the West, how they're adopting to the reality on the ground. And what do you guys think about that strategy?
I have some thoughts, but maybe Vladimir has some first.
I think that's what we hear and that's what they are practicing. But in the long run, they would run out of ammo as opposed to Russians, which are actually increasing and increasing. So sooner or later, and I suspect within even this year, they will so much overpower that, so they will start pushing, westward. Ben, do you agree with this?
I completely agree. I think it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, they recently got this agreement between the UK, Rishi Sunak, and them, and it's meant to scare Russia. They're using this like this is the new the wonder weapon came back from Litvenko, the spy chief, saying this is our wonder weapon because now they won't attack us because we're in this defense treaty with the UK. Whereas the UK has just shut down its last steel smelting plant, one of the only advanced economies who can't create steel from scratch. There's this guy Verhofstadt, a EU guy, who was very angry in front of the EU Parliament, said, Russia produces 3 million 155 millimeter shells a year. We can't even produce 1 million. It's basically a logistics impossibility to continue this. I mean, there's fresh videos, you might have seen some, of like a whole battalion of Ukrainians saying who will not follow the orders to deploy a step forward, and about 2/3 of them step forward. They list their names saying, I'm not going to follow orders. There's mass desertions to the other side. It's going terribly. Vitaly Klitschko, the mayor of Shittown, which I only say because there's shit on the streets apparently because of the plumbing in Kiev, said that there's what's the perfect. I'm going to actually look up the actual word that there is. An insane ammo shortage, so there can be war with Europe. Where this stuff comes from, active defense, just fend off for 1 more year while we deliver something. We're talking tanks, we're talking stuff. France is talking about the long-range weapons. By the way, Germans voted it down. Thank God they did something rational. The Taurus long-range missiles. It's all coming from there, and it's mirror imaging. Like shit, this is what they did, and they won. And they it's not the counteroffensive failed; it was defeated. Like absolutely, and in the meantime, it demilitarized and deindustrialized the West, and they're in a panic, especially the tiny midget countries, like as you mentioned, the Baltics, somewhat Poland, but Poland is going on the EU route and allowing German soldiers on their soil, which historically, that's just very, very stupid thing to do. So I think most of that doesn't come from the ground on Russia. It's not a viable strategy. It's Western sponsors trying to think something up, how we can get past the November elections or this year, how we can keep this running, and it's not working.
Yeah, it's not. Also, I agree with you when you brought this example of the soldiers, that of course at first there was like some kind of adrenaline going for Ukrainians. They invaded us, we have to fight. Then another wave of adrenaline. West gives us money, West gives us weapons. But now the fundamentals kick in. Their economy was, to begin with, was unbelievably corrupt. It's not capable of producing that much. So in the long run, people are just, no pension, no salaries. A lot of able bodies are either killed or run away. So that's why they're talking now in many European countries, we have to rearrest Ukrainians and send them back. So then they sooner or later, I think Russians are probably using this strategy, going back to Napoleon and invasion of Russia, like at least in Tolstoy version of War and Peace, there's a Russian military guy says, we don't need to attack, we don't need to use soldiers. I have like 2 big weapons, freeze and hunger, and these two my best generals are going to sort of, and I think that's what we're seeing a return. This is, there is these guys, they used to have all this equipment. Half of it is probably not working in this cold. So I think that Russians are definitely, how far they would move, and that still remains to be seen. But my reading, it will be settled by the end of this year.
I agree. And by the way, the support has run out, not just militarily, but you mentioned the economy. It really is like he got like he's doing at Davos. Look, we want this peace conference, and Switzerland should do it without Russia, without China, without Brazil, without major players who are. And he's got like 1.5 billion, like Swiss krona, like not the 60 billion that he's prepared for. And it doesn't seem like it's coming from the US. The 50 billion from the EU is not really coming. Hungary has a part to play in that, but. I want to point something out which I noticed because NATO has an official social media account. I follow them on X, and they said, look how united we are. We're more united than ever. And I delve into the comments, and all the yellow, blue flags, all the Ukrainian accounts, they're in despair and feel betrayed. Like, holy shit, we thought that Ukraine was supposed to, NATO was supposed to defend us. And it turns out we're defending NATO at their cost. And I think rightly so. But there was one guy, an older military account that said, we just want the Europeans to honor agreements like they did at our meetings and the Americans to fight like they do in Hollywood movies. It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad, but that's the state that, I mean, you can go 2/3 of every comment was Ukrainian being very, very pissed at NATO. There's this huge, imagine that mental shock. We were supposed to win. We're going to go to Moscow because all of these Western countries, they're going to send everything. We're going to win. And suddenly they said, well, you lost, buddy. We're out. It's a huge
maybe they should have looked at
motivation.
Iraq or Afghanistan or Vietnam.
I'm just saying, imagine the morale, man. Imagine that.
Well, active defense, I think, could have actually been a very successful strategy if they did it 12 months earlier. I mean, this whole Ukraine thing, we have this tendency of doing things that might have worked, but 12 months too late. I think that's true with active defense. I mean, because if we had spent 2023 on active defense and that was what was marketed at the end of 2023, they could say, well, look, Russia did not really gain any ground to speak of. We inflicted such and such losses. And so it was a success, but they spent the whole year hyping, they'll be doing summer vacations in Crimea. And so
12 days to Melitopol. I always bring that up. It was so fun.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that they are regionally, of course, like in many situations, like returning back to Israel, when the country is under attack or pressure, there is certain unity. But I think the more war goes on, the more people start asking questions, and they're already asking questions about Netanyahu and so on. The same thing with Zelensky. For a while, he was just a hero, showing on TV in his kind of green shirt and blah blah blah. But now they get the reports how his wife gets, some kind of jewelry here, how his minister caught with $2 million in his suitcase, and common people who are surrounded by either invalids or coffins. They say, what are we fighting for? So it is a very sad proposition, and but again, I suspect Eastern Ukraine is more than ready to come back into the fold, if you will allow me to say that. But Western Ukraine, I don't think Russia should push that.
Yeah.
And I think Putin is smart enough to agree with you, Vladimir.
Yeah.
He's also doing very wise things at the WEF, where he held his annual meeting. And he was snubbed by China, which comes from the Western headlines, because the Chinese who were there, a huge delegation, didn't come to his peace talks. And immediately this guy with the ego of, basically a superstar, an actor, said, well, he's below my level. I am a president, and I only talk to presidents, so he should talk to the prime minister. Yeah. Just imagine if you're a Chinese person reading that. So he's doing these very, very wise things, and the photo was amazing. It's like Vilnius last year, because there's this big group of people very demoralized, and two giants, Yermak and who's the new defenseman, Umerov. I don't know why they're huge.
Umerov, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in gardeners uniforms, the green, and in the middle this tiny little green midget, which was Zelensky. All they got out of it, one of the headlines, I think Forbes, that the peace meeting Ukraine had at Davos, all they got out of it was a larger family photo and nothing else.
Yeah, but if we can make a turnaround, there is one issue which we touched, and especially in connection with Chechnya, that what's happened in Chechnya, yes, it was destroyed, but then it began to be under Kadyrov, and Russians were putting a lot of money. The roads are back, buildings are back, employment is back. I haven't been there, but from what pictures I see, from what I hear, is actually a thriving society.
Grozny looks amazing. I agree. I haven't been.
They're doing economically. So I think, if there is a goodwill on all sides, maybe the same thing can happen in Middle East, but it has to be a tremendous will and but a tremendous desire on all sides. Will we see it? I don't know, but it is good to know that it is kind of possible. Sometimes investments and economic prosperity can change century-long, enmity. Look at this territory between France and Germany. Now, France and Germany are the best friends. They were fighting each other like crazy.
That's why Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, exist.
But you need leadership. You need leadership that's invested in that, and then they have to, that has to be the message to the people constantly, reinforced every day. Peace through mutual prosperity instead of we're going to kick them out and take all the land.
Yes.
We won't have time for it, but right now, France and Germany, they're the guys who don't have leadership. Nothing.
True. Vladimir, I know you've got to get to your polar ice plunge. We really appreciate you joining us for the hour. We're going to have a special episode on tomorrow, Saturday, so we'll be broadcasting again Saturday. But thank you very much, Vladimir. Thank you, Ian, for joining us. Ben, thank you so much, as always. But
enjoy the swim
up there, unless you guys have something more to say. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and all the best to you guys. And I hope to chat with you again soon. That's how we get to some truth, by sharing and by sort of challenging and by talking. So I'm very happy to do that.
Same for you. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye.